I remember the moment like it was yesterday. The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the wide stretch of our property. Everything was calm. Too calm. I'd been walking around the yard with the kangaroo, named Louie, a pet we had gotten when I was going through a particularly difficult time in our marriage. My husband, Jake, was always busy, either at work or with friends. I'd been feeling neglected for months, and Louie, with his wide, curious eyes, had started filling that void. It started innocently enough. He'd nudge me for attention, and I'd scratch his ears, letting his presence soothe my loneliness. But one day, after a few too many drinks, it happened. It wasn't planned, nor was it something I consciously wanted. It was more of an emotional lapse, a desperate need for connection. There was a vulnerability I didn't even realize was building inside of me, and Louie, yes, my kangaroo, became the outlet for those deep, unspoken needs. After that, there was no going back. What followed was a blur of guilt and shame. It was an affair of the strangest kind, one I knew I couldn't confide in anyone, especially Jake. I tried to compartmentalize it, burying it deep within me, telling myself it was just a one-time thing, a mistake. But as weeks passed, the secret grew heavier, and the emotional strain started to weigh on me. Jake never suspected a thing. But one evening, as he was walking through the backyard, he caught a glimpse of me and Louie in a way that he never expected. The look on his face, disbelief, confusion, horror, is something I will never forget. It wasn't just that I had cheated. It was that I had broken the most basic expectation of loyalty. I wasn't just betraying him with another person, I had crossed a line that seemed almost unthinkable, even to me. The days that followed were agonizing. Jake, though initially stunned, was relentless in his questioning. How could I have done something so strange? So perverse? I couldn't explain it, not fully. There was shame, anger, and, oddly, a lot of confusion. For me, the act with Louie had been about seeking validation, seeking something that seemed to fill the void. For Jake, it was a violation of trust on a level I couldn't comprehend at the time. It became clear that this wasn't just about the kangaroo, it was about the emotional distance that had built between us. Louie, in his strange way, had symbolized the loneliness I had felt for so long. Jake had been absent, not emotionally present, and I had acted out of a desire for connection, for love, even if it was in the most bizarre and unthinkable way. The road to reconciliation was rocky, filled with painful conversations and long silences. We had to confront the deep emotional rifts between us, not just the betrayal, but the reasons it happened. Could our marriage survive something so unconventional? Could I ever rebuild Jake's trust, knowing how far I had gone to fill a void? Months later, we're still trying to make sense of what happened. There are days where we both feel like the emotional scars might never heal, but there are also moments where we talk about the deeper issues that led to it all. While the bizarre nature of my infidelity will always be a source of embarrassment and regret, it opened up an uncomfortable but necessary conversation about the unmet needs we both had in our relationship. In the weeks following that terrible day when Jake caught me, we entered a strange limbo. It was as though the air between us had thickened, weighed down by both the absurdity and the gravity of what had happened. We didn't know how to talk about it at first. I was too ashamed, too embarrassed by the bizarre nature of the betrayal. It was as if I had crossed some invisible line, not just in our relationship, but in the very fabric of normalcy. How do you explain something so inexplicable, so outlandish, to someone you love, someone who had never even imagined such a thing was possible? And Jake, he was silent for a long time, staring at me like I had become a stranger in his eyes. The first few days were the hardest. I could feel the weight of his judgment, even though he didn't speak much. There was a tension in every room we shared. I'd see him, and my heart would race, but then I'd look away, unable to hold his gaze. He, too, seemed uncomfortable around me. We were both walking on eggshells, trying to navigate a territory we had never once imagined stepping into. One evening, after dinner, we finally sat down to have a conversation, a real one. Jake's voice was shaky at first, a mixture of anger and confusion. "Why, Emily?" he asked, his eyes red and tired. "Why would you do something like that?" His question wasn't just about the kangaroo, it was about us. His pain was evident in his voice, but so was his need to understand. Was it me? Was I not there for you? Was I not enough? Those words hit me harder than I expected. The reality of the emotional void I had been feeling for so long hit me with full force. I hadn't realized just how much I had been neglecting my own emotional needs, thinking I could bury them beneath work, family, and the everyday motions of life. The loneliness I felt had been growing in the background for so long that I couldn't pinpoint when it had crossed the line from sadness into something darker. I had never been good at expressing my feelings, never good at telling Jake how much I needed him, how much I missed him. And now, in this bizarre, tragic way, it had exploded into something he could never have prepared for. I don't know, I whispered, my voice breaking as I fought back tears. I was just so lonely. You were always working, always distracted. I felt invisible to you. Jake's face softened, but the hurt was still there, sharp and undeniable. He exhaled sharply, his hands trembling slightly. I'm sorry, Emily. I really am. But this is too much. How do I even begin to trust you again? How can I even look at you the same way? I could feel his pain. I could feel the fracture that had formed between us, widening by the second. He wasn't just grieving the loss of trust, one could see it in his eyes. He was grieving me, the person he thought he knew, the woman he had spent so many years with. I wasn't that person anymore. Not in his eyes. It wasn't just the act itself that hurt Jake, it was everything that had led to it. His mind kept returning to the question, why the kangaroo? Why not another person? Why did I have to cross that line in the first place? In his mind, it wasn't just about me being emotionally neglected, it was about my desperation for connection, about how far I had gone to fill that emptiness. I could feel his rejection like a weight in the air. He wasn't angry, he was devastated. And I, too, was devastated. My actions had shattered him. I hadn't just broken his trust, I had broken the very foundation of the life we had built together. We decided to go to therapy. It felt like the only option. But the first few sessions were painful. Sitting across from each other, facing the brutal truth of what had happened, was excruciating. Our therapist, a calm woman named Karen, was patient, but even she seemed to struggle with how to unpack the situation. It was, after all, not every day that someone walks into a therapist's office saying, I cheated on my husband with a kangaroo. But Karen didn't judge. She focused instead on helping us explore the deeper emotions at play. As the weeks passed, I began to understand that the affair with Louis wasn't really about him at all. It wasn't about the animal. It wasn't even about the physical act. It was about what Louis symbolized, an escape from a life that had become painfully stagnant. I had chosen him, not because of some sick desire, but because in that moment, he was the only thing that seemed to offer any kind of attention, any kind of affection. He was present, he listened when I spoke. Louis's presence filled the silence that Jake's absence had left behind. It took months of therapy, painful discussions, and rebuilding our sense of self-worth and trust before Jake and I even began to start healing. The hardest part wasn't just talking about the affair, it was facing the reality of the loneliness that had festered between us for so long. It was realizing that we hadn't been partners in the true sense for a while, that we had let emotional distance creep in and take root in ways we hadn't even noticed. Slowly, though, the trust began to rebuild, piece by piece. Jake had to work through his anger and hurt, and I had to face the emotional gaps in myself that had led to this point. I was grateful for his willingness to try. But even then, some things would never be the same. There were days when I still couldn't look at him without feeling the weight of my mistake. And there were moments when Jake would still stare at me, as if he was trying to see the person I once was. There would always be a strange, painful chapter in our marriage, now a reminder of a time when our relationship was tested in a way neither of us could have imagined. But as the years passed, we learned to communicate better, to be more present for each other. We learned that trust could be rebuilt, but it required vulnerability, honesty, and, above all, a deep understanding of the emotional struggles that had led to such an unthinkable betrayal. And though Louis the kangaroo had once been the symbol of my deepest loneliness, he too faded into the background of our lives. The absurdity of it all became just another part of our story, a painful but transformative chapter that had, in the end, brought us closer, though the scars would always remain.